Hey, welcome back to Season 5 of Porcelain Peak, a strange and scary podcast featuring chop talk, trivia, and deep dive main discussions into odd and unusual. I'm one of your hosts, Tone, and I'm joined by, go ahead and say your own name.
Jigsaw, the man, I don't know.
The Germinator.
The Germinator!
And?
John Connor.
Nope. He's John.
I'm a cybernetic organism.
And Anthony.
And Anthony.
And this week for Chop Talk, we're going to share our opinions on the state of Hollywood. Then we're going to play trivia. Anthony's still streaking hard.
Oh, yeah, big streaks.
And for our main discussion, we are starting Cameron Christmas.
A very jolly James Cameron Christmas.
Loved
That's
it.
the full title.
Yep. So good. Short and sweet. And so what we're going to do this week is talk about Terminator and T2 Judgment Day.
I'm going to need your pizza and your pizza.
My favorite part of Judgment Day is when John Connor just picks up that gun on that suburban street and just goes, Judgment Day! Starts blowing people away.
If that at all interests you, then stay tuned and we'll go ahead and get started with that Chop Talk.
Why don't you take an axe and chop it open?
Oh, great. Well, how you guys doing? What I just had to deal with off screen and off mic was ridiculous. So I'm trying to reel it in. John, good week. You just had an anniversary at Peach.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that or no?
I've been at Peach for 7 years, which is pretty crazy.
That is crazy.
It's definitely the longest I've ever worked for a company. And it's been a very interesting ride. I mean, I like it's had its lows, and more recently has a lot of highs.
Do they give you stuff like here's a gift card or here's a card?
So it's usually at
jacket.
like actual like milestone years. So for my 5th year, I got like a plaque that currently hangs over my desk.
I've had that.
And then there's supposed to be something coming at 10 years.
Okay.
So hopefully I stick around.
At 7, you just get to play 7 minutes in heaven with the boss.
Yeah.
Whoever's on shift that day.
I mean, based on my role, that's probably me.
It's a massive
Just
HR
you.
nightmare.
I'm just like,
Well, that's great, Anthony.
I'm doing pretty well. You know what I just saw recently?
No.
I saw 2 men fuck in a dark corner of a
basketball
basketball court.
Wow.
Just the slight jingle of pocket change pulsing.
Wow.
Song lyric from the band
Alopecia?
Y from the album Alopecia, because we just got our Spotify Wrapped / Apple Music review in, and
Replay.
yeah, and it just showed me that this year is just the fucking same as last year. It's all the same music, nothing's changed. Everything is awful.
for me, it basically it just confirmed that if there's an album that comes out that has like a tinge of sad but hopeful, that I will glom onto it, and it will be the only thing I'll listen to for the entire year, which I can say very wholly about the Wonder Years' new album, The Hum Goes On Forever. They just announced they just announced that they're going to be going on like a U.S. tour for that, and it's going to be around my birthday. So I'm very excited. They're going to be playing with...
No, it's his birthday.
No.
It's because it's on the early side. It's on the short side, all right? It's on the 5th.
All right, Mr. Think for yourself.
They're opening with...
so their opener is going to be Hot Mulligan. So I'm like, this is going to be a sick-ass show. I'm very excited.
Fun, yeah.
That's dope.
My replay was all sloth rest, basically, all the way down. Turtles all the way down.
Yeah, sometimes I do feel like a horseshoe crab. Speaking of, I did want to bring up, we talked about this earlier. I have been so emotionally vulnerable recently. I was talking about how like everything that I watched a Billie Eilish interview on YouTube yesterday, and
is it the 6 year, like the one that she does every year?
And
with
something
the same company?
about watching her, because I've watched all of them that she's done every year, and so I was really excited about this one. I don't even listen to Billie Eilish that much anymore, but I love the idea of like she gets to look back and see, you know, and that made me emotional, like her being able to look back and see what younger versions of herself thought about things. And then at the end her mom comes out and is like hugging her and stuff, and I was just like and then watching Terminator, he's like, you know, I'll be back, and I was like, that motherfucker is gonna be back. You know, hasta la vista baby. He does hasta la vista baby at the end. It was just very emotional. But yeah, I've been crying a lot, so that's...
Dude, I'm right there with you. I was watching a Lindsay Lohan movie on Netflix, and I was like, oh my god, she's so proud of her dad. Hits me, dude.
I mean, I'm always emotionally vulnerable, but I
Not
mean,
like that, bro.
I mean, but I also don't put myself in a position where I watch a Lindsay Lohan Christmas movie on Netflix. But that's just because I don't have that particular set of taste buds when it comes to films.
Speaking of Christmas stuff, though, the Santa Claus's show is out.
Mm-hmm.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Highly recommended if you're a fan of that. Well, Tim Allen being Santa Claus.
Yeah.
The first episode is called Good to Ho. So there's little jokes like that where it's like, it makes sense in the Santa Claus world, but also just sounds ridiculous in the real world.
I watched most of the first episode and I really liked it. I didn't get quite to. I know that David Krumholtz shows up as Bernard again at some point, but
yeah, I haven't gotten there either. At one point, they want to sprinkle them with whatever powder they have. It's like, all right, we're going to use some of the angel dust. Tim Allen's like, whoa, we got to think of a different name.
That's awesome.
So it's a lot of adult-themed jokes like sprinkled in. I was like, this is actually pretty fucking funny.
I'll have to watch the rest of it because I've definitely been in the holly jolly mood besides all of the weeping
Did you guys
that I've been doing.
Happen to watch the new Mario trailer?
I haven't, no. I've just seen headlines that are like, Chris Pratt reveals his Yahoo, his version of Yahoo. Chris Pratt reveals his version of It's a Me, Mario. Like, basically just like, oh, this is how Chris Pratt says this line of Mario's. And
Spoiler alert, he sounds like Chris Pratt.
I think it looks tight.
So
It looks fun as fuck, dude.
So for me, I am currently very, very angry with Nintendo.
Okay.
So I have
Mr. Nintendo?
I have been a part of the Smash Bros community for a long time. It's one of my favorite games. Melee is probably one of the most like deep and intricate fighting games that wasn't meant to be deep and intricate of all time. And they've worked very hard and created a very large grassroots community where people have made careers off of playing this game against all the odds, and without the approval of Nintendo or like massive sponsors or any of these things. They basically just like the community has built up these pro players and like has built up this community to make something really fun and exciting that's been the best that it's ever been in years this year. And there's this company that was putting together like an actual like a real thing, like a world tour of like different like events that lead up to a championship at the end of the year. And they had everything set up for this, and then 2 weeks before the championship, Nintendo hit him with a cease and desist. And so I'm very angry at Nintendo right now.
But did you watch the trailer?
No, I'm very angry at Nintendo. I did not
man.
watch the trailer.
That's crazy. That sucks, yeah. I mean, especially after how long it's been going on, and then at the very end, they're going to come in, but...
And after all of that whole nerdy ass spiel that John just gave, listener, you might be asking yourself, how has this dude ever gotten laid? And
it's a shock to me.
Yeah, and don't worry,
Come on, bud.
he assures us that his marriage is happy. But yeah, I mean, I think it looks gorgeous, but I'm not a big Mario fan. Like, I could take it or leave it. Like, I liked the old games when I was a kid, but I'm not like, gonna be. I don't think I'm gonna be there day one to watch the new Mario movie. Like, when it pops up somewhere, I'll probably check out a little bit of it. Like, probably take some crazy hallucinogenic drugs and
I think
trip out to it.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be worse than the one we had when we were kids.
No, yeah,
which is ridiculous.
Speaking of John Leguizamo, though, I checked out The Menu over the weekend. I found that...
Was he in that?
He is in that. Yeah, he was like...
Did you find it delicious?
I did find it delicious. I found it very fun. I love that it was very contained and that it wasn't something that felt like they were going to try to make a franchise off of or anything like that. It was one story that was told...
The Menu 2, Electric Foodaloo.
And was meant to kind of have commentary about society and also, be fun and also, kind of lightweight scary. It's not really like, it's like horror-esque, horror adjacent, but it's more really like a black comedy, which is not what I was expecting from it. But that's all I'm going to say about it.
All right. Yeah.
Because I think that the two of you would really get a kick out of it.
I'm very interested in checking it out. Speaking of checking things out, you can check it out now. The Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special is out.
Oh, yeah.
And was hilarious. And to tie it into horror a little bit, Kevin Bacon does talk about his role in Friday the 13th.
Yeah, it talks about how he got an arrow shoved through his neck. Yeah, like he goes into. I loved that, and I wanted to text you so bad about it, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to keep talking about it when I knew you weren't watching it. I was like, I'll get around to it at some point. Like I didn't want to be like, oh my god, this is so good, but I really did enjoy it, and I found it
pretty fucking
heartwarming.
funny,
And
yeah.
surprise, surprise, I cried at the end.
You're really going through it, bud.
Yeah, it's so weird too. Like I was watching Wednesday, and something about that made me emotional. I don't know. I'm just, I'm a soft boy. But let's talk about a little bit of news.
A little bit.
Please, for the love of God, let's get this back on track.
Tad, we're chopping it. This is exactly what this segment's for.
Yeah, all our asses are out, and they're getting chopped. So the first bit of news that I wanted to talk about is Steven Spielberg. There's a big discussion going around because The Fabelmans is flopping very hard.
Or was it out? I didn't even see it. It's not wide, is it?
I think that it is limited release right now, but I guess even for limited release or in other markets, it's flopping pretty hard. And people are having the discussion about how, it's the whole you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain sort of thing, where Steven Spielberg basically invented the blockbuster with Jaws and, pioneered that entire thing. And now his projects have kind of been alienated from pushed out by modern blockbusters, which are things like Black Panther and, the
but
Marvel
the stuff that he's been
movies
making
and stuff.
haven't been very good. Like BFG, I don't think was well received or very good. And then Ready Player One was not good.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that each movie he makes is Jaws. I'm just saying that it's interesting that he's in that spot now where it seems like the movie world has taken what he kind of pioneered and created and run with it in this direction, and he's still making movies in this direction. He's going straight forward with his plan and everything. And I really want to see The Fabelmans because it's basically supposed to be autobiographical about him like falling in love with movies and having a troubled household. David Lynch is in it, acting. He made sure there were Cheetos on set. So I want to check it out, but yeah, it's not doing super well. And I think that it's just I wanted to hear, and I got your opinion about why do you think people don't really seem to care about Spielberg movies anymore? Like people don't get hyped about them.
It was that, and then it's like that Matt Damon video I sent you guys, right? Where he was saying like, we used to be able to make these movies, and we can make them a certain way and have a certain style and have them maybe not make as much money because we would get a ton of sales when the movie got released on video or on DVD. Mm-hmm. Now that is completely removed from the equation. So these movies have to make like 100 million easy for them to even be considered successful. And so that streaming Netflix essentially has kind of broken the movie system in a lot of ways. And
and when it goes straight to streaming, they're not going to make any money off of it.
Yeah. And
I mean there's a contract involved, and they do get some money, but it's not
Even remotely
orders
what they
of
make
magnitudes
off of,
below.
DVD, Blu-ray sales or whatever.
So I think that's a problem. But physical media, it's out. It's crazy to me. And I was thinking about this the other day. It's like we saw a medium come, and now we're seeing it go. Like we saw DVDs start. We were alive when DVDs first emerged.
VHS was for the most part pretty new when we got involved with it. VHS wasn't like a super popular medium up until a few years before you and I were born.
Well, it was prohibitively expensive for
a
while, and DVDs were super expensive when they first came out, and then those got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then Blu-rays were just kind of like prettier DVDs, and then 4K was just prettier Blu-rays basically. And I was talking with Adrian about how the fuck up too is the reason that people will buy physical media is if you load it with cool special features and behind the scenes stuff or steelbooks, make the cover, the art. Criterion does a really good job of making each of their releases feel like you're getting a fucking book with like artwork and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I have some of the like book ones. Those are dope.
But studios aren't spending the money on doing stuff like that anymore unless you're like a Shout Factory or you're an Arrow Video or you're a Criterion Collection. And then also the streaming services don't really support that kind of stuff. Like even when you rent or when you buy a movie with iTunes extras, most of the time it's maybe, if you're lucky, 3 or 4 of the shorter extras off of the DVD if you had bought it. And for somebody who loves commentaries, like I'll be talking a little bit later about how I listened to the James Cameron commentary for T2 for the extended edition. I had to find the commentary on YouTube but still buy the extended edition on iTunes, and the extended edition didn't include the commentary. It just included like a couple behind the scenes featurettes. And like, if you really wanted to get people to buy more of your shit in streaming, be the streaming or buy, watch your stuff on streaming, be the streaming service that includes like bonus features. And it kind of reminded me of like when we watched Misery, and it had that like 10-minute interview in the beginning with the director. Like I think that's with Rob Reiner. I'm like, yeah, do more of that shit. Like,
I loved that.
That'll get me more into like, I'm gonna go watch stuff on HBO because I know they're gonna have cool bonus stuff to go along with it.
I think Disney does a solid job of this as well. They don't necessarily include it in what you're watching,
but they'll put out like a making of documentary.
Exactly. So they have like complimentary content that's built around it. Like they have an entire section on their streaming service that's basically like, hey, here's the behind the scenes or making of this, and this. And I think that is something that I find, very engaging, and it's something I can go back after I've watched an entire show or an entire movie and thoroughly enjoy kind of seeing, what went into, making the show tick.
Netflix actually just put out a like the making of the 1899 show or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so I was like, oh, maybe streaming services are starting to catch on to this idea that if they put out supplementary material, people will be interested in it. But
yeah, that's cool for people like us that are into the behind the scenes and the DVD special features, because I'm sure there's people that have physical media and they don't even think about that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Right. But as far as, movies like what Spielberg's making, it's just who's going to the movies. You know what I mean? It's people that want, if you're going to spend the money, because movies are getting expensive, like you're going to make it a bigger event, or there's a lot of people with families. You taking your wife and kids and everyone to see The Fableman? Probably not. You taking someone to see Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's probably got a little bit for everyone, most likely. You know what I mean? So it's like you can't really compete. Unfortunately, although Fableman is probably fantastic, who's really going to go?
Also,
watch
on top of that, you got to think about the thing that's been a big deal in conversation recently too. Has been a lot of theaters will just not show The Fablemans because they want to have 12 screenings of Black Panther and 6 screenings of Black Adam, and they want to fill as many screens with whatever the fuck big blockbuster movie it is, and they don't have room for these other movies. And we're lucky if our local art house theater gets them around Oscar time, if they're Oscar nominated. Like, so that's another reason why like a Spielberg movie 10-20 years ago, that movie would be playing everywhere, because it'd be like, it's Spielberg, like, no, and Spielberg has always had like his miss movies in between his big blockbuster movies. But yeah, I just think it's really interesting kind of like that he's kind of been phased out. Mm-hmm. But then you still have these directors like Tarantino, where he can come out with stuff and people are fucking like over the moon about it. But that's also because he's had a track record of pretty much like 9 amazing movies.
And he also makes very like violent, action-packed,
crowd pleasing.
He's also the kind of person who doesn't, as much as it all has kind of that Tarantino style, he doesn't make the same movie ever unless it's literally in the same franchise. Like everything feels like it's different.
I think a better comparison than Tarantino would be Scorsese, because he came out with the Silence, which nobody outside of the Oscars gave a shit about. And then he did The Irishman, and even that was like a Netflix partnership thing. So he seems to have kind of made the smart move of going like, I don't think people are going to go to the theaters to watch a Martin Scorsese 4-hour movie, and those are the kind of movies he still wants to make. I'm totally there for it, me personally, but I can understand why, similar to Spielberg, he just doesn't have the pull or the name recognition outside of people who grew up with his films or are engrossed in his filmography. And
he also doesn't have the advertisement anymore either, because you mentioning this movie is the first that I've heard of this movie.
What?
And I am a film buff.
Silence?
No.
The Fablemans?
The Fablemans. I'd never heard of it.
We talked about it before on the show.
I don't remember being
not
involved.
that he recalls.
On the show, but in this room, definitely.
Maybe John just doesn't have total recall.
On top of that, like if you're having the conversation in the room and we're not recording the show, it means I'm likely looking at a computer trying to figure out how to set the fucking shit up. Yeah, I'm trying to make it so we can record a thing, and so I don't get to always be a part of the conversation. So that probably should went.
Yeah, head on a swivel, dude.
Well, that ended up being a lot better and more in-depth conversation than I thought it was going to be. So the only other little bit of kind of news that I had was we're going into Avatar season with Avatars coming out, and James Cameron has been saying a lot about his feelings on how people feel about him making a sequel after all this time. But the thing that I thought was the most interesting, and I texted you guys about, was that so much money was sunk into this movie. I think it's something like $300 million, and Cameron is saying that
is that a lot for Hollywood? Like, I know it's a lot for us, but is that a lot by Hollywood standards?
I mean, I think that it's probably somewhere around like an Avengers movie level of money, which makes sense. But he was saying that in order with that and marketing and all of the other costs and everything, he was saying that it needs to gross enough to become either like the third, fourth, or fifth highest grossing, like the fourth or fifth highest grossing movie ever, to break even, basically, which is
and they've already
insane.
Let him make 2 more sequels, which is crazy. Because if this movie tanks, like they're like, well, we already spent the money on these other ones.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see also that difference between these 2 iconic filmmakers, where Spielberg's doing his kind of like smaller projects that are making no money, and then meanwhile Cameron's over here like his whole deal is like trying to break the box office with another one of his movies. And studios pour so much money into his stuff.
What I was gonna say too is like
he hasn't come out with a movie for fucking almost 15 years.
The theater now, no matter what time of year, is got to be a blockbuster. Like, you can't release these smaller movies. Sometimes you get lucky. I think Glass Onion did really well, but Netflix released it in the smallest amount of theaters, and that is something coming off of a random...
They fucked Glass Onion so hard, Netflix did.
Because they didn't wide release it?
Yeah, because people loved Knives Out, and Knives Out was an example...
I would have been there day one.
Yeah,
if it showed it anywhere near us.
Yeah, Knives Out was an example of a
random thing.
Of a random, original, lower budget movie that did gangbusters, and instead of getting a really awesome I'm sure the movie's great. Netflix, of course, one of the corporate evils, swoops in and goes, cool, now we're going to truncate your theatrical release of the anticipated sequel, and then a week later put it on Netflix. So the people who are like me, who are like, oh, should I really go to the theater, if it were playing around us, to go see Glass Onion? Even if it was playing down the street, I'd be like, well, it's going to be on Netflix next week.
Yeah.
But the thing about James Cameron that I think is people give him a lot of flack for, but also I think he knows what's up. Even after all this time, he knows that what's going to get people's butts in seats is spectacle, blockbuster shit. And his entire goal, and he said this in interviews, is I want to tell an environmental message. And the way that I feel that's going to get to the most people is not through making documentaries and going to the bottom of the ocean. It's going to be making blue alien movies that make a shit ton of money and sneak that message into people's brains. And so far, based on pre-sales, seems like this is going to do gangbusters. Pre-sale tickets are through the roof in terms of people who, as much as everybody on the internet, it's like, I don't give a fuck about Avatar. It's like, well, you're still, a lot of people are spending their money on tickets. So do you think that it'll end up in that top? Will it be up there with the first Avatar?
If it's good, if it gets good reviews and it gets that good word of mouth like the first one did, then I think it stands a chance, because it is an established property. It's still doing the 3D thing, so they're going to charge more money. It's going to be awesome in IMAX, so anybody that's into that, like us, is going to go see it in that format. So that's fucking double the ticket price right there.
Yeah, we paid a somewhat ridiculous. I mean, that's a regular movie ticket in LA, but for us, they were pretty expensive. But yeah, that's because we were like, well, it's Avatar. We're going to see it in IMAX, 3D, high frame rate.
I want it to be as close to what Cameron wants it to be.
Yeah,
because he is a filmmaker that takes the time to do that sort of thing. So I want to see it in that way. But yeah, I think it's going to get pretty fucking close, especially if it's good.
Yeah, and also the time of year it's coming out, Christmas time.
I think that while myself included, the community around just like filmmaking in general has kind of shit all over the concept of bringing out a film this late and like a sequel this late. I think that now what's been accomplished is there are people who are nostalgic for it. And so I think there will be more people who will show up to the theater because of that.
I'm more nostalgic for when movies felt like events like that, where it felt like a big fucking deal to go see Avatar, and everybody was talking about it. Yeah, and that's what I'm more nostalgic for. Is I hope I can capture even just a little bit of that feeling of being excited to go to a movie again, and if that requires me seeing it in 3D, IMAX, like all this shit, and paying extra just so that I can enjoy being at the movies, I'm here for it.
I think it'll be interesting because we'll get kind of two sides of the theater going experience, because I'm going to do the opposite, just because I can't handle the high frame rate or the 3D. It makes me sick, and especially for what will undoubtedly be a overlong film. I can't stomach it.
Yeah, it's over 3 hours long. So
yeah,
Is it?
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, it'll be rough. So I'm not doing all of that. I'll end up seeing it probably on some mid-level screen, or maybe even a smaller one, because most of the showings, I'm guessing. Well, no, I'm not gonna do that.
What?
You should watch a cam.
A cam of a 3D version, so it's all freaking stupid.
It's really blurry.
Somehow the dude filmed it from behind his 3D glasses, so they're like fogging up the whole time.
Just take your glasses off and you'll be good.
It'll be interesting to see if the spectacle carries past it. Like I said, because we're gonna rewatch the first one beforehand, so I'm interested, having been so far removed from the hype.
So far.
I
don't know if I've watched it in 10 years.
Yeah, if it's gonna have any value to me at this point.
It doesn't look like it. But yeah, that's all I had for news. You guys want to get into some trivia?
Yeah, before we start with trivia, if you haven't already, please send us your congratulations on 200 or whatever the fuck. Just a text or a video or a voice memo that says, "Hey, congrats, guys," or "You guys fucking suck," whatever.
Yeah.
You can make it funny. You can make it silly. You can make it really nice. We'd appreciate that, especially with old sad boy Tony's.
Yeah, trust me. My feelings won't be hurt. Not really.
Yeah, so do that, because we are coming up. This is 196. Yeah, so we got just 4 more, which is pretty crazy.
I put out some feelers for some people to submit stuff.
And I'll submit one just for the fuck of it. Maybe say some nice stuff to you guys.
Do like a funny voice.
Yeah, do like an Arnold voice.
Yeah.
I'll do what I did to you,
Arnold's pizza.
where I changed your voice and then blocked your face.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, somebody from Witness Protection Program has a review for.
Yeah, so send those in on Instagram, or you can do it to email portsandpeak@gmail.com. We look forward to sharing those when we get to 200. But now we're going to get started with trivia.
That Christmas house of wax, the fog, piranha. It's one of those, right? Right?
We're going to mix trivia up just a little bit. Anthony, you said you got a new thing.
Remix. Yeah, so since we've been kind of struggling with the trivia songs in past weeks, I thought instead this week, and maybe in future weeks, we could bring a trivia question that relates in some way to what we're talking about in the main discussion. You guys can give me your guesses for what the answer to this trivia question is, and then next week we'll revisit it, and I'll give everybody the answer.
Okay.
So your trivia question, and again, you can guess, but I won't reveal the answer. Your trivia question for this week is: in 2012, there was a poll of 2,000 film fans asking them what they thought the top 10 greatest catchphrases from film history were. The number one catchphrase was "I'll be back" from the Terminator.
Okay.
What do you guys think the right behind it number 2 catchphrase was? And again, I won't reveal it this week, but if you guys think you know at home, shoot us a message, your guesses. But what do you think the number 2 greatest catchphrase of all time? Or they're more like catchphrase lines, just lines from film. I found the catchphrase part a little bit confusing.
I don't think this one's right, but my guess is going to be, I've got a bad feeling about this, Han Solo.
That's a good one, John.
Is a good guess. You got one, Tone?
Hasta la vista, baby.
All right. Well, tune in next week to find out what the number 2, and I'll probably just go through the rest of the list and let you guys know. But yeah, that's what I had. If one of you guys wants to bring a new trivia question that somehow ties into Avatar next week,
Okay. I can
more
dig
than
up some
welcome to.
Avatar. What's the name of the metal?
Unobtainium. Boom. 10 points.
All right, we're going to play Trivial Pursuit still. I'm going to read to John. John's going to read back to Anthony, and Anthony will read back to me. And we're going to go through all of these 6 categories around Rockin' Robin style. John.
And I'm going to guess what the categories are called this time around.
Okay.
Just for fun.
Go ahead.
So category number 1 is monster.
John?
Indeed, it is Monster.
Hey, you don't get a point for that. In Jaws 1975, what is the name of the ship that sunk during World War II and of which Quint is a survivor?
Oh.
Got them black eyes. Like a doll's eyes.
What?
Excuse me while I kiss this guy.
I've legit spent like the last month wanting to text you, like, hey, what's that kiss that guy line? And I don't remember why, but it's been stuck in my head. What is that from?
It's Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
It's Excuse Me While I Kiss the Sky.
Yeah.
It's from Purple Haze.
Purple Haze, yes.
Okay. There's a name
Purple
for that.
Haze,
I'll have to bring it next
all
week.
through my
There's a
veins.
specific name for mishearing lyrics, and I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I'll have to look it up.
So I'm going to say the USS
Ooh, you're off to a great start, John.
Annapolis.
Oh, it's the
Indianapolis.
Ah, damn it.
Damn.
Real ship that sunk, and a bunch of dudes got eaten by sharks.
I was so fucking close, though.
Yeah, you just needed a little more Jones in your life.
Yeah.
Tough break, bud. Fuck.
It was brutal.
Yeah. I'm sad.
All right, Anthony. What is the name of the novel upon which The Village of the Damned from 1960 is based?
Well, the fact that I didn't know that it was based on a novel
Put you off to a great
puts
start.
me off to a great start.
You just
Yeah.
hit the ground roll.
Yeah.
Ground rule.
Even though we talked about this movie, so I'm sure we mentioned at the time
We sure did.
that it was
We've-
based on a novel.
We've definitely said this on the show before.
Wow. I got nothing.
Village of the Damned is based on the novel Push by Sapphire.
It is The Midwich Cuckoos.
That does sound
yeah,
familiar.
it sounds
Yeah,
very like
yeah.
Lovecraftian. I can see why they retitled it.
It's a
Y'all stoked to go see the Midwich Cuckoos?
it's a John Wyndham book.
John Wyndham. Don't know who that is. Tone, what was the name of the Swiss surrealist painter who designed the titular creature in Alien from 1979?
Are they looking for H.R. Geiger?
Guy Geiger?
They are. Do you have any idea what HR stands for?
Human Resources Geiger.
Hell rat.
It's actually Henry Rollins Geiger. You got it. It's HR Geiger.
Does it say what it is?
No. I was just curious if you knew.
Geiger, I'm dead.
I always think of him in Jackass. It does like the off-road tattoo.
Yeah.
Christian motherfuckers.
He shows up in Jack Frost. He plays like the kid's hockey coach.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's before his hair turned
random.
like totally white, so he's just
Yeah.
got like a big random gray patch on the back of his head. Yeah.
He's like, meanwhile, in the band Black Flag.
Pretty much.
He's like, I went from Black Flag to Jack Frost.
All right, Anthony, what do you think the next category is? Moving into round 2 with me on the leaderboard.
Psychological.
Sorry, it's gore/disturbing.
That's what I said.
John in Hostel, Part 2 from 2007. Which character survives the film? Is it Beth, Whitney, Lorna, or Paxton?
I'm going to say Whitney.
The correct answer is Beth.
Whatever,
I
man.
don't know if I ever watched Part 2.
What movie
threw
were
out-
we talking about?
Hostel?
Yeah, I couldn't get past how bad I thought the first one was.
Agreed. Anthony, of what character in The Loved Ones from 2009 is Bright Eyes the mother? And there's no multiple choice.
The daughter.
Yeah, I'm like, I know the character, but I don't remember what the fuck her name is.
Need some angel dust.
Bright Eyes is the mother of,
Fuck.
Connor Oberst.
I don't know, Anna.
I mean, not super far off. It's Lola Stone. I feel like Anna,
yeah.
Lola, they kind of have like a slant rhyme going a little.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like Indianapolis and Annapolis.
I'll give it to you.
Oh, I hear my stomach's getting all upset that I'm doing so bad at trivia. Tone, for your psychological question. The remake of The Fly from 1986 was a remake of the movie with the same name released in what year?
Ooh.
Also something we've covered.
What year was that, John? 59.
Oh, fuck. So close.
Always
58.
one off. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, dude, back to Trivial Pursuit, baby.
My weird way of remembering that, I remember when we were doing the episode, was 1986. So then I took 86 and I flipped it. And then I was like, but it's not 68. So then I dropped it down one. So I was like, 58. Okay, there we go.
Put the thing down, flipped it, and reversed it.
A little bit. Right on. All right. Well, I guess I'm still in the lead. And we're moving into round 3, which you think is?
Well, there's a little brain here, so I think this is probably psychological.
You would be correct. It is psychological.
Sweet. So for your gore/disturbing question,
John, unused footage from what Stanley Kubrick film was used in the theatrical cut of Blade Runner from 1982? What?
Ooh. Ow.
oh, it's Kubrick.
You know. So you would think that it would be 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I'm not gonna think, John. This is your question. You think?
And Trivial Pursuit is a game that likes to fuck with me, but it also likes to double fuck with me when I overthink it. So I'm going to go with what I originally thought, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
It is The Shining.
See? It
From
likes to
1980.
fuck.
Well, it is a horror
Excuse me. The Shining.
game. You know?
What? Can you read me what the question was again?
Nope. Unused footage from what Kubrick film was used in the theatrical cut of Blade Runner?
So it's not like you would have recognized the footage from The Shining.
That's
it's
fucking
unused.
crazy. I wonder.
Yeah.
I knew that there was Kubrick footage used, but I didn't remember that it was The Shining. But I do like that for the psychological question. You were doing all kinds of like reverse psychology on the makers of Trivial Pursuit.
Fucked my mind, you know. Hundo. Anthony, who directed Cube, or Cube, as it should be pronounced, from 1997?
Ugh. You got a fucking hard card this week, buddy.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
He's giving him a hard card, you know what I'm saying?
No.
But the streak, all good things must come to an end.
How funny it would be if I won with one, though.
Let's hope not. That's kind of boring.
All right.
Flames to dust.
You passing?
Rennie Harlan.
It's Vincenzo Natali. He also directed Splice from 2009.
Oh, yeah, and he also did an episode of Cabinet of Curiosities.
Oh.
Yeah, I knew that I had read the director's name recently, and that's why it was, because I was like, that's random.
I was listening to This Is Important the other day with the Workaholic guys, and they were talking about Splice. It was like, yeah, it's this whole movie about this guy who wants to create something that immediately just wants to fuck that thing. And then he does. I was like, yeah, that movie's fucking weird, dude.
Seems pretty realistic to me.
But they said it's hilarious. Like, if you go thinking that it's going to be a comedy.
I want to rewatch it because it's been years since I've seen it, but there's some stuff in that movie that I'm like, it's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I want to put myself through
Uncomfy.
that. Tone, for your psychological question, what root does Minnie Castavetti claim causes the odor of the pendant she gives Rosemary in Rosemary's Baby from 1968?
I figured out why you're not doing well, because you're not saying that it's a Q that you need an A for.
Yeah, I'm trying to switch it up this episode, and I was getting tired of that bit, so I was like, I'll drop that bit, and it's fucking me so raw right now.
I don't know. Rosemary.
You'd think, right? No, it's Tannis root, which I never in a million years would have gotten because I've only seen that movie once.
It's a hard week, huh? So I'm still winning with one.
Tough crowd.
Been a hard
And we're
week's
moving
night.
into...
The Satan category. The occult, supernatural, paranormal.
Paranormal, you got there.
Yeah.
John, your question is, Annabelle Creation, 2017, was which of the following in relation to Annabelle 2014? A prequel, a sequel, or a standalone film?
It was a prequel. Get me on the goddamn board.
That is correct.
Yes.
Good job. Creation was a dead giveaway.
Well, the fact that I've seen all of them is also a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Which movie is Annabelle Origins?
Is it an origin or is it an origin?
Annabelle, A Conjuring Story.
Anthony, what was the name of the clipper ship destroyed in the 1880s in The Fog from 1980?
The USS Indianapolis.
Sorry, it was the USS Annapolis. No, it was the Elizabeth Dane.
I've only seen The Fog once, so...
Speaking of 80s movies, In Search of Darkness 3 is out.
Yeah, I was like, man, the 80s were a long-ass decade full of a lot of movies, because they just keep coming out with those.
I think like a couple hours of it, and they have gone through so many of the movies already that it was like, what the fuck even is this movie? I was like, I don't know. I didn't know at least 3/4 of those movies.
Yeah,
I was like, holy shit.
That's one reason I don't think I've even watched the second one, but that's just because with my experience with the first one was, I got to watch that. I got to watch that.
Yeah.
I got to watch that. And I was like,
So we're doing for season 6 is just going through all 3.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not enjoying watching this when everyone, I'm like, okay, I got to add that to the list. I got to add that to the list.
They did have, coincidentally, The Fog.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did they talk about some Fogtown founders?
But they did talk about Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, and that popped up, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the one where the guy's aunt wants to fuck him.
Fuck him.
And,
That's a deep Peach reference, you know what I'm saying?
Hey man, sometimes I get deep in the beach. Tone. For your Satan question.
like he's in the room with us.
The archaeological site in the opening sequence of The Exorcist from 1973 is located in what Middle Eastern country?
There's no
No choices. Only skeletons.
Egypt.
Oh fuck! It was Iraq, which I think you got tripped up on a Iraq question last week.
Recently,
Yeah, I think so.
It was where Ryan Reynolds was buried.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because I thought it was Afghanistan.
All right, well, John and I are tied,
C.
and we're moving into
hockey questions.
Killer,
dude, I'd say it is killer, and I would be fucking y'all up at some hockey questions.
You, the only thing I know about hockey is that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yes.
Anthony Silva.
Anthony Silva. Internet darling.
John, what film in the Halloween series from 1978 to 1989
Wrong.
was that's wrong even for this when this card was made?
They were probably discounting.
Was the first to not involve John Carpenter?
Oh, that's tough.
Not to involve John Carpenter. I'm going to say that because I know he was involved with 2 and 3. I'm going to say he had nothing to do with 4.
Which is
Halloween 4. Something Michael Myers.
Yes.
come on, baby.
The Corey story.
Corey, the Halloween story.
I feel like now we're like spinning this into like the Boy Meets World universe.
Dude, that's sick. I would watch that.
Yeah. So let's see. So there's.
I mean, I'm good with giving it to you for Halloween 4 because that's right, but I want you to get the subtitle just to see you struggle.
Here's a hint. Michael Myers went away for a movie.
So the Return of Michael Myers.
That is correct, sir.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah, and I know that because 6 is Curse of Michael Myers. I think.
Yeah. So it's Return, then
Revenge
of Michael Myers, then Curse of Michael Myers, then H2O, then Resurrection,
then Rob Zombie.
Then the new ones.
I'll take it.
Nice. Uh-oh.
Shh! Don't.
Oh.
We don't talk about Bruno here, my friend.
All right.
Anthony, for your hockey question. What is the nickname of protagonist Teresa Gelbman in Happy Death Day from 2017?
It's fucking Tree, baby.
It is indeed Tree.
Hey, you're on the board.
On the board, baby.
Still got a chance, man.
Hey, you're in striking distance to a bare minimum tie.
Yeah.
Oh, because you only have 2?
I have 2.
He's got
No, you have 2, so I have to tie with you. Okay. Tone, for your hockey question, what is a field goal? No, what is a touch pass? What 1982 film was credited to director Tobe Hooper and producer Steven Spielberg?
Poltergeist.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Poltergoose.
Thank you, John. I wouldn't have given it to you otherwise. It is Poltergeist.
Yeah.
From
In the running.
1982.
And they're cool. Next one. Anthony, what's the world to you? What's the world to you?
What's wrong with the world, mama? This is international.
It's saying international should be burned into your cerebellum.
John in The Host from 2006.
So
Titular
host.
character nabs which Park family member? Hyun Seo, Nam Ju, or Nam Il?
The second one sounded like if somebody asks you, like, "Hey, man, you Catholic?" No, I'm Jew.
I think it's Hunseo.
That is correct. Uh-oh.
It's not a win.
No.
Y'all got to get yours, and
But
we'll see
you
what
have for
happens.
sure beat Anthony.
This is true.
Hey,
This is
can
true.
we chill out with that? All right.
You beat him.
Can you let me enjoy my pity international question?
That's okay. Feel it.
Bong Joon-ho, baby, I love you. Anthony, in what European country is the prestigious Tanz Dance Academy in Suspiria from 1977?
Germany.
It is indeed Germany. Fucking frame one to that shit.
Yeah, love me some Suspiria. Also, didn't I get a Germany question last week too?
It was a German expression question because of Nosferatu.
YouTube.com/who gives a fuck. Haven't done it in a long time.
My favorite channel.
Tone, for your monster question. In Train to Busan from 2016,
Damn it.
who is the person that Suk Woo is going to see in Busan? You're like, okay, which character is that?
Yeah. Because,
Yeah, who is the person Suk Woo is going to see in Busan? That's why they take the train.
her mother.
Unfortunately, Suk Woo is the father, and he's
so
going to
his
see his
ex-wife.
ex-wife.
Fuck! There you go, bud.
I'll take my first solo win of the season.
Wait, so did we tie and he won?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. But congratulations, John. You broke my streak.
I feel like
I hate you for it.
I feel like I'm playing like Win Ben Stein's money against you every week, where I'm just getting my ass kicked on a regular basis, and then occasionally I just get one rascally win.
Yeah, I walked in the door today and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let John have it this week. I'm gonna captain it.
Since they sent my wife walk in one day, and I just said I'm gonna let John have it this week.
After you talked about Super Smash Brothers for an hour. Shoot. I believe it.
Get it over with, bud. Well, that's going to wrap it up for trivia. Congratulations, John, on your first solo win. If you enjoyed that, then rad. Hit subscribe and like and whatever the fuck. And if not, then you're going to get some ads because that's punishment for not liking.
Yeah,
You
you
were
like
gonna
right
get ads
now.
anymore.
Yeah.
Still good ads.
I lied. There's going to be ads. And then we'll get started with Terminators.
Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/porcelainpeak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more. Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/porcelainpeak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
welcome back to Cameron Christmas.
Welcome back to a very holly jolly James Cameron Christmas.
Welcome back,
Cool.
Cameron Christmas.
Why are you yelling?
Because you were whispering. He went a
I'm
step
not
above,
whispering. I'm being sultry.
and then I went ridiculous.
Because there's nothing sexier than the Terminator.
And we decided this week to go with James Cameron's most famous movie, Piranha 2, The Spawning.
We should have.
Yeah, but no, in reality, we're talking about The Terminator and T2 Judgment Day, as mentioned earlier. If you've been hearing my stomach growl over the past 15 minutes, sorry, but I'm not a cybernetic organism. I got to eat. Your man needs to eat. Which, a little bit of trivia before we get started.
Let's go.
That was originally a concept that Cameron had for the Terminator, was that he had to eat in order to keep his human flesh growing and healthy. So there was actually supposed to be a scene in Terminator 3 where he ate a chocolate bar, and fans found out about it and got so fucking livid about the idea of the Terminator eating that they took the scene out of the movie.
Neato. So fans have been shitty forever.
Oh.
Super cool.
Oh, yeah.
And
wait till I tell you about fans of the Bible. The oldest blockbuster. Shit gets crazy. There's a twist with this dude who comes back to life. You'll never believe it. But anyway, we're talking about Terminator, though.
We're going to talk about Terminator. So if you haven't seen these movies, then spoiler warning.
What the fuck have you been doing for the past 30 years?
Yep, pretty much. This one
It's
stars
40. It'll be 40 years in 2 years.
Linda Hamilton,
Jeez. Yeah, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor.
Arnold Schwarzenegger
As the Terminator.
and the guy playing Kyle Reese. What's his name?
Michael Biehn
Michael Biehn.
as
Kyle Reese.
Kyle Reese.
Yep, and that's
And Lance Henriksen as Cop.
Cop.
Man.
Which one is he? Is
The
he
one who's
from-
creepy and who is in all the other stuff.
Who was an alien.
Oh, okay, yeah. He's great. Yeah, the cops are kind of
Or
hilarious
aliens.
in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally forgot that they were even a part of this movie. But a little bit of
ACAF. All cops are funny in this movie.
it's weird to think of a time when the Terminator franchise wasn't just like a staple of blockbuster films. We've had so many Terminator movies, but at one point, James Cameron was working on a little movie that I referred to earlier called Piranha 2: The Spawning, which I don't think even that really anyone considers a James Cameron movie because he got booted off of it, like I think midway through or something, and they got all fucked with. But anyway, while he was working on that, he had an intense fever, got very sick, had a nightmare.
The only solution that he could find was
More
more
cowbell.
cowbell.
No, it turns out that the solution was robot skeleton coming out of the fire, because that's what the dream was. The image that came to him in the dream was a robot skeleton coming out of a fire, like pulling itself out of a fire. And he went, cool, I need to figure out how to make a movie based on that whole thing. And then as he was trying to kind of pitch the idea, he realized that he would never in a million years at this time have the budget to set a movie in the future where there were robots all over the place. So he was like, well, how do I fix that problem? Set it in present day and have a time travel plot. So that was pretty much the impetus for the Terminator. Originally, the idea was for the Terminator character to be more of like what Robert Patrick in the sequel is, which is he's supposed to be an infiltrator, so he's not supposed to stand out. He's supposed to be more of like Lance Henriksen was actually originally kind of the stand-in for the Terminator. I guess when they were trying to get producers on board with it, Lance Henriksen just showed up like 15 minutes before a meeting, kicked in the door, wearing like a leather jacket and scars on his face and like gold foil on his teeth, and just went in, sat down, and just stared at the producers for a solid 15 minutes. And then as soon as James Cameron walked into the room, he just got up and left. And the producers were like, cool, you can make this Terminator movie, but don't fucking cast him as the Terminator because he's creepy as hell. So yeah, the Terminator was supposed to be very different. Arnold was being pushed by his agent to be the Terminator. They were like, yeah, you should do this, you should do this.
You think this franchise would have been as successful without him? Looking back,
Depending on who they cast, maybe. But I mean, I think it's hard with almost 40 years of hindsight saying, oh, like Terminator is just synonymous with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
especially T2.
Yeah.
He doesn't super shine in this.
The catchphrases made me think about that a lot, where I was like, those the catchphrases that come from, I mean, we talked about it earlier with the trivia question, I'll be back. Like, that is not a line that really should have ever blown up, but because it was Arnold and because of his accent and the way he delivered that line and the way he delivered all those catchphrases, yeah, I don't think it would be nearly as popular or memorable without him.
And that's in this one, right?
Yeah, I'll be back, yeah.
Yeah, and interesting, too, that the Come With Me If You Want to Live
Is a Kyle Reese line.
gets attributed
Nice
to Arnold,
movie.
because I think he says it in T2, but it's originally Kyle Reese.
Yeah, so the Terminator was supposed to be very different. There were a lot of much crazier, grander ideas for what this movie was going to be. A lot of that ended up getting saved for the sequel, and this ended up being a real down and dirty movie, which is weird to think about for James Cameron, who we just talked about making like a $300 million movie, and now has a couple of the highest grossing movies of all time. To have filmed most of this, it turns out, without permits, guerrilla style, like calling Arnold up at 3 a.m. and saying, you know, suit up, we're going to go film this pickup shot that we need. Them getting chased by police off of like different areas they were filming is just wild to go back and see. Like, to
It's
me,
fucking inspiring.
yeah, and to me, this is James Cameron's first movie. Like, it really is it sets the stage for what he would become.
This movie is so simple and so subtle, like with just its execution. I mean, basically, and you can talk more about this, this is basically a slasher movie, and it does have that really Carpenter feel. I mean, you could pop out Hamilton and put Curtis in there, and it's a very similar movie.
Yeah.
And in that term, and you have this big, you know, intimidating, obviously not as big as Arnold, but like there's still these big, very stoic characters, and Arnold barely talks in this. But
He has, I believe, 14 lines, and Cameron specifically wanted to give him fewer lines than he had in Conan to like make him seem even more like alien robotic.
Yeah.
Give him even fewer lines to speak. But and Cameron didn't want Arnold to play the part. When the producers and the agents were saying like, you should get this Arnold guy to do it, he was like, no. So Cameron went to a lunch with Arnold intending to pick a fight with him so that he could go tell the producers that Arnold wasn't possible to work with. And instead what he ended up doing is they met together. Arnold wanted to play Kyle Reese, but he found himself talking constantly throughout the conversation about how he felt the Terminator should be played. And Cameron just ended up sitting there and sketching his face, and finally was just like, stop talking, and just like sketched him, and was enthralled by how weird his face is.
yeah, because it almost seems like he doesn't even have fucking eyebrows in this.
Well, he doesn't. They get burned off when he when the car's on fire.
I see.
Yeah, which he had his eyebrows insured because he was convinced they weren't going to grow back after he had to shave them for this movie. But yeah, and then he totally changed his mind, and it changed the franchise, where he was just like, nope, we're going to put this big imposing.
He's massive. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he's more toned into, but he's slimmer. In this, he's just like a wall of.
Well, I mean, this
Yeah.
is in the heat of him
Like
being
Mr. Universe.
doing the Mr. Olympia, the Mr. Universe, all that stuff. And on top of that, there's almost like a curiosity to his character, where like he's looking in the mirror after he's been in this this first like real big knockout drag out battle, and it's just like trying to fix things, and like is just like very quietly going through these things. And obviously it adds to kind of the terror factor about this character, that like he yanks out his own fucking eye and doesn't care, and then just throws on sunglasses and is like,
For me, really, the only scene that doesn't completely hold up, like
it's the
the
effect.
effects. Yeah, I mean, they're not awful, but you can tell it's
Yeah.
fake. But I mean, if you would have done CGI that long ago, it still wouldn't hold up. Like 10 years from now.
And Cameron
half that
talks
shit's
so
not gonna
much
show
about
up.
that with these movies and with T2, where he's like, there's so much of just basic stuff that he was like, yeah, you could do that in an hour with CGI now. And he was like, back then, you know, it was Stan Winston, like, and I think
blood, sweat, and tears to make it fucking happen.
And huge shout out to Stan Winston for
Mocking me.
for creating the Terminator, like, and making it scary. And yeah, the first one, like you said, is it was inspired directly by Halloween, which it seems like fucking everything we talk about just traces back to Halloween. in
Even
terms
the
of being
music,
inspired.
dude. Like, you still have that classic Terminator, but it's so like it's not overly utilized. Like I think Salvation is all that. Like it becomes just synonymous again with this franchise. It's used very lightly, and then a lot of it's crazy 80 synths. So I was like, this soundtrack's fucking dope.
Yeah, and I think this is where you can see a lot of where Cameron's inspirations were coming from, and it's cool to see that because he would kind of then in T2 and moving forward and in other movies solidify like his Cameron action movie style. But in this one, he was obviously heavily inspired by Halloween. Blade Runner is a huge inspiration for the way that this looks. Mad Max, he talks about how much Mad Max inspired him, which I think is really funny when you look at a movie like Salvation, which ended up basically being Mad Max with robots. That was one of his inspirations. But with all those inspirations going into it, I still think his version of the future that you see in this movie is very different and really like interesting with all of the like blue lasers and stuff and the big robots, and it's all done with just models and little stuff that they had to film in like in a few nights. Yeah.
Once again, thank you, Stan Winston, for creating this vision of kind of like this like monstrosity of what the future is.
Mm-hmm.
Even the stop motion stuff that they do toward the end with the endoskeleton is pretty good. Like, I mean, I've seen movies that are big blockbusters, like RoboCop, for example, has this stop motion stuff where they try to splice it in, and it's like, yeah, that looks like awful. In this, it's decent.
Well, and it's something about the herky-jerkiness of it feels scarier, and the fact that the Terminator is limping, and you see that Arnold, when he had his skin on, has been injured, and then when the Terminator is limping around, if you look really closely, you can see that one of his, like, basically what's supposed to be his like robot Achilles tendon on that foot is like hanging loose. So there's all these little bits of attention to detail, and yeah, when you finally get that reveal, we take it for granted now because the Terminator endoskeleton is so iconic. The chrome skull with the red eyes,
super fucking
but
scary.
at the time,
dude.
yeah, terrifying to look at. Something about just like a metal, like evil grinning skeleton is scary. And when they upgrade it to just like CG robots brawling, like I don't care as much. But
also predicted a massive trend on YouTube for 40 years later in hydraulic press videos.
Yeah.
And the idea of someone, even, you don't know the whole, like, I'm a robot from the future thing, but the idea of someone going through the phone book and just picking a group of people to murder. Like,
so fucking creepy. I love that he's just like, all right, I got the entire list of Sarah Connors, all of them, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it plays into all of the classic tropes of the slasher, where it's like, the slasher is this unstoppable killing force. He's killing basically everyone who is either related by name or like related by family or friends around the final girl, who ends up having the final showdown in the factory, which also becomes a staple of Cameron stuff. Is stuff taking place in like industrial factories and shit. Even, I mean, the second movie is basically this movie again, but just with a lot of extra added stuff. And you talk about how great this movie is, and I agree, because it's so simple. But that comes down to, just like with a lot of these other movies that end up being so fantastic, budget, because he wanted to include so much of what ends up being the plot of the second one in this one, all of the Cyberdyne stuff and like going and finding where Skynet was originated and all of that, and that all just got cut because partially Cameron was like, I want to leave it a little bit more mysterious so I have room for a sequel, and also because he just didn't have the budget. The T-1000 was supposed to be in the first movie, and in the original treatment for Terminator, it was 2 Terminators were sent back. One is the Arnold one and one is the Liquid one. And then 2 humans are sent back. One of them dies in the time travel process, and the other one is, I guess, Kyle Reese. And but this movie blew my mind when I was a kid, because I think it was my first exposure to that idea of like going back in time, and then the things you do there end up causing things in the future, because Kyle Reese going back and meeting Sarah Connor ends up birthing John Connor and then leading into the resistance.
And it cycles back around on it, because the only reason he knows about it is because John Connor in the future showed him a picture of his mom while he was pregnant with John.
And the only reason any of this is happening is because Skynet is trying to send somebody back to kill John Connor, a Terminator to kill John Connor. If they hadn't built the time machine and tried to send somebody back to do this, then Kyle Reese never would have gotten sent back, and John Connor never would have been born. So it creates this like weird paradox of Skynet kind of being their own downfall in terms of their strategy.
The if they wouldn't have set the Terminator back, then they never would have got the chip that we see in T2,
Yeah.
which then creates the robot army for them to send back. Like, I was like, holy shit, that's
it's
complicated.
It's very complicated, but until we start to get into Rise of the
grandfather
Machines,
paradox.
like it doesn't fall apart under too much, under basic scrutiny. I'm sure if you sit there and you pick at it for a little while, you could probably be like, well, the logic in T2 doesn't quite make sense because of yada yada yada, but
T2 doesn't make a lot of sense.
it's good enough on its own, and like I said, and both of these movies have this where, for the most part, unless you really want to tear it apart, the logic holds up enough.
Well, because the story is good enough that you don't care too much about all of the, because it could easily have been shitty or overly complicated and, cause all these weird time travel paradoxes that are punching holes and everything. But it works out relatively well, at least in this first movie. And Kyle basically brushes over, Reese kind of brushes over the whole thing by saying his goal is just to get there and maintain the future that he has. Basically he's not trying to change the future in this movie. And that's another thing too that I always forget that doesn't get introduced until the second movie, this idea of maybe we can change the future. This is all just, we got to survive this Terminator and make sure that John Connor still is born and becomes the leader.
Because maintaining the future keeps everything the same. So then he still gets sent back. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Changing the future means, well, then how did he get sent back? Then it starts to mess with your head.
Yeah, it's time travel, Marty. Something that I also really, really love about this movie is the way that you get all of the exposition for what's going on in the future and how all of this works. It's all done during action and chase scenes. So it'll always be Reese and Sarah running away from being chased by the Terminator in a car, and Reese just shouting to her this is what the future is like this is what the Terminator is, and I think that his performance helps a lot with that, because he seems very much like a guy who has fought his entire life and had his life ruined. Yeah, he's pretty unhinged, and also a total creep, because he basically is oh, also, Sarah, I have had this picture of you the whole time, and I'm madly in love with you. And that's a little bit where I feel like the simplicity of Terminator doesn't work quite as well, because that relationship doesn't 100% sell for me. Outside of they're both hopped up on adrenaline.
She's like, bro, I'm gonna die. If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna
get
die.
laid,
I'm gonna
yeah.
die happy. And
Yeah, she rings in the new year.
yeah,
And Michael Biehn is pretty fucking hot in this movie, so I can definitely see. But I love even in the beginning where you're not 100% sure what his intentions are. You see, the Terminator shows up, he shows up, and you don't really know at the beginning if he's the good guy or if the Terminator is the good guy. At this point, I mean, we know in hindsight, but at the time, you're not 100% sure which of these people is good and which one is bad.
And they toy around with that idea in T2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, if you
Very
don't know,
intentionally.
then you think this is going to be real bad.
Yeah.
so we've kind of talked about how things end with this one. Basically, they end up, Kyle Reese dies, and we end up winning the day.
No ceremony around that either, which
No.
I was kind of I was shocked by watching it this time around, and also really impressed by is that he just gets blown up and dies, and there's no final heroic line or anything like that. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit to know that Kyle goes back in time and does all of this and doesn't live long enough to see if he succeeded in his mission. So he dies before even knowing that, whether he saved Sarah or ensured the future or anything. And I'm like, that's tragic hero shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so knowing kind of where this ends and kind of discussing the roundabout logic that it kind of gets to, like I said, that does somewhat
I know,
hold up.
right? Going crazy.
How do we feel about the movie as a whole? Would we like to rate this?
I think it's great. I mean, I think it's a 5. It's sci-fi, but it's also a horror movie, and I don't think when people think of the Terminator franchise, they think of it as a horror movie. And this one, and parts of the second one too, really are.
So, are we gonna say that you think it's 5 out of 5 robot Michael Myers?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's great. I loved it, and I'd watch it again right now. The only thing, I guess, is that I love Arnie.
Yeah.
And so this movie completely underutilizes him for what he is now famous for. But in the context of the movie itself, putting my own personal opinions aside, like it works better without him being in the spotlight.
Yeah, and I think that that's a lot of people's problems with T2 is how Arnie gets in that movie, and
My boy.
yeah, and he's legitimately terrifying, and I love that he put in all the training, and then Robert Patrick did a similar thing in T2 where Arnold blindfolded himself and learned how to take apart and put back together and reload weapons. He learned how to shoot without the recoil like making him jump or blink or anything like that because he wanted to seem like he was a machine. And yeah, I think that all of the performances in this first one are great, and I love that for at least for Linda Hamilton and for Arnold, we get to see them go even kind of deeper into the possibilities of these characters in the sequel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that they established the kind of psychological aspect in the first one, and then that gets explored even more in the sequel.
Because you do get some horror moments in the sequel, but I think much like what Cameron tends to do to these horror franchises is he's like, cool, now in the sequel it's going to be big action movie.
Yeah. Big action news. So I think it's tough. I really, really enjoy this movie.
Okay.
I don't know. It's hard because like
it's for me, and maybe you can agree or disagree, but it doesn't. When I picture Terminator, I think T2 because I feel like that's the more iconic movie, and so sometimes it's hard to think about this movie as even part of that franchise.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna go with a 4.5. I think this is a 4.5. Robot Michael Myers. Like I said, it is a very, very enjoyable film. I just think that the constraints make a very simple film, but the constraints also show in some places, and I think that's the little parts that sometimes take me out. Not for very long, and not for enough for me to be like, oh, this is a dumb movie. I'm like, oh, I'm having a great time. Yeah. But some of it seems like it wasn't even that it didn't age well. Some of it's just like that it probably like wasn't super great when it happened.
Fair enough. I'm in sort of a similar boat to John, but I was telling you that I'm really conflicted because, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I would just say that they're both. I'm just going to get ahead of myself. I think both of these movies are probably 5s. But the Terminator, I think, works perfectly fine as a standalone thing. Doesn't need to have any sequels or anything like that. It works perfectly fine as a little contained story. And I don't think T2 works at all without the original movie because the entire concept of T2 is subverting the original movie and switching things up and riffing on those things. So it's hard to say like T2 is a better movie because Terminator, it reminds me a lot of like Star Wars versus Empire Strikes Back, where it's like, yeah, Star Wars did it all first and broke that ground and works as a contained solo movie. You blow up the Death Star at the end, everybody's happy, they get their medal, it's great. The sequel takes everything that worked from that movie and just takes it to its like logical endpoint, where it's like, cool, how far can we push each of these concepts and these characters without breaking them? And then in further sequels, just like with Star Wars, you start breaking the concepts by doing, crazy shit with them. So I think that's probably as close a comparison as I can think of, but
that works. I mean, even the Alien.
Yeah.
Franchise, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I'm not a huge Aliens fan, so I think that Alien is like the perfect movie and Aliens is all right. But in this case, yeah, I think that it's hard to separate them in my brain, especially watching them back to back. And I'm just like, I think they're both fucking amazing movies. Very different though. Yeah. Oddly enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that there was a 8-9 year gap between Terminator and Terminator 2, and between these movies, Cameron made Aliens and made The Abyss. So there's two pretty big projects in between him making the first Terminator and making this one, and I think you can definitely tell.
Yeah, I mean the daytime.
Yeah, the fact that this isn't all at night. Yeah,
we get to T2.
I think his style just kind of changed a little.
Still very blue though.
Yeah,
not as the gritty, more Abrams blue.
Yeah,
in T2, but
lots of blue gels on all the nighttime scenes. And
I think T2 is great. I think what they did, subverting your expectation with Arnie's character, is great. I think that he, takes the spotlight. I think a lot of it was because he had become this big action star. at the time, and so they're like, okay, let's switch it. I think Robert Patrick does a good job, but the logic of his character doesn't make any sense. Because even in the context of the movie itself, they set up the rules for what his character can and can't do, and then immediately break them. He's like, oh, he can't take the shape of complex machines or stuff with chemicals. But then he changes into people. So that immediately breaks that. And then also, this is a bigger nitpick, but...
Well, I don't think he's actually
clothes,
turning into people with like working internal organs. I think
Yeah.
he just is wearing a shell that looks like a person, basically.
But then the clothes don't make sense. And then at one point he turns into somebody wearing a watch, which again, it's like, you just said you can't make a machine. That's a machine. Like,
but again, is that watch? I don't know why I'm going out of my way to try to defend the logic of this, because really at the end of the day, it doesn't really make too much sense. But I do like that they do try to address that, because there's that point where he tries to walk through the bars and he's holding a gun that he didn't make, that he didn't form, and it doesn't go through the bars. And I think that's supposed to show like he can make things that look like a watch or look like clothing, but they're not actually those things. It's confusing. But also there's the whole fact that the idea in the first one, I thought, was supposed to be that Reese got sent back with this Terminator right before Connor and the rest of them blew up the time machine and destroyed all that stuff. So are we supposed to be under the impression that Skynet didn't just send that Terminator from T1, but also sent the Terminator from T2, and John also sent Reese, and also sent the reprogrammed Arnold all at the same time?
Yeah.
On top of that, they sent them all at the same time, and they sent them to different points in the timeline, or they sent them at the same time, and then two of them hung out for fucking however long it takes for John Connor to go from being not a thought to then being a fucking preteen.
Yeah, there's a lot of things where you can be like, okay, well, in the first one, why didn't they just send the Terminator back to when Sarah was a kid, and she would be a lot easier to kill? And then,
they brush over it when she says they sent back two. So I mean, yeah, essentially they are changing what they said in the first one, and then that's what I'm saying. The more you add to this franchise, like the harder it is to keep it contained and like tight. And I think after this, it busts open at the seams. Like, I mean, I don't remember all of Rise of the Machines, but I know past that, it's like, this doesn't make any sense.
Well, then they were like, well, what if we had a Terminator that was both a robot endoskeleton and liquid metal? And it's like, that's fucking not as good as the one that's just liquid metal from the previous one. But outside of the logic totally making sense, I do love the idea that it's like, hey, how do we make a more dangerous Terminator? It's like, okay, we have this liquid metal, but the liquid metal Terminator seems a lot more like unpredictable. And it's almost like, and they kind of talk about this a little bit in the movie, where it seems like almost like Skynet was worried about sending the T-1000 back, and that was an idea from the first movie where they were going to be like, we don't really want to send this thing back because we're afraid the T-1000 is going to go so like intense and rogue on his mission that he's going to destroy the future, and fuck up everything that we have in the future. So we're not going to send him back. But yeah, and then also having it be Robert Patrick, because I guess originally when T2 was being written, they were going to have Arnold play both Terminators.
That would have been a little rough.
Yeah, and
they
were
tell that to later movies.
When it's a little rough, yeah.
And I guess Robert Patrick was described by his agent as having a David Bowie slash I don't know, somebody else, but like David Bowie. I was like, I guess I can kind of see that a little bit. But
he is great in this. And the running, I was like, you could give Tom Cruise a run for his money, buddy.
Well, Cameron was saying that he ran like as fast as a car, basically. He was like, at one point when John is on the little like motorcycle and he takes off out of the garage, and Patrick starts chasing after him, Furlong was like, oh yeah, I'm on a bike, like I'll outrun him, like no problem. And he starts taking off, and Patrick immediately caught up to him and grabbed him by the back of his shirt and yanked him off the bike. And they were like, okay, we got to take that again. He was like, Cameron was like, you got to get a head start because this guy's fast as fuck. He's in great shape and looks amazing. Also, I just want to reference real quick how hilarious I think the bit in, I think it's Wayne's World 2, or maybe it's the first one. I think it's the second one where Robert Patrick comes up to Wayne's car and he's like, have you seen this boy? And Wayne's like, ah, takes off. But Cameron also intentionally wanted to do kind of like an ACAB messaging by making him like a serve and protect police officer who's actually like, a shape-shifting deceiving evil.
Yeah, and it immediately gets your guard down
Yeah.
if you're anybody interacting with him.
And he feels a lot more like an infiltrator. He blends in. He can change his shape. I love the scene where he's already killed one of the step parents, and then he's on the phone, and they do the whole like, "How's Wolfie? Wolfie's fine.
Well,
Your step parents are dead. Or foster parents are dead."
That they bring in the dog thing back because they talk about that in the first one, and that was really cool. And then the other bit I really loved is her friend's voicemail, which is like, "Psych, you're talking to a machine."
Yeah, machines need love too.
I
Yeah,
was like, that's so fucking stupid but hilarious. Get in here, you got something.
So I do think that there's a lot of comedy that's added to this, which I think is part of where the horror goes away, is that there's a teenager involved, and so there's the comedy that tries to fold the teenager in, and like him like teaching Arnie how to fucking like do human shit is
To
cute.
blend in.
It's cute and endearing, and it makes you care about this like repurposed T-800. But I think what really shines in this movie is the effects work. The fact that this liquid metal style Terminator holds up today pretty fucking well is very impressive.
I think the effects, the digital effects mixed with the practical effects is great because they do blend a lot. I mean, the little fucking metal flowers all over his shirt.
Yeah, when he gets shot.
Yeah, like not the best effect, but it was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think it's easy to forget that, and Cameron talks about this on his commentary, that effect has been replicated and ripped off so many times since then, and evolved with CG, that people forget that he created that idea basically in the Abyss, having like we'll be talking about this later in the month, but having like, there's a mimetic water thing going on in there, and once they had figured that out, he went, cool. He's a person who always makes sure the technology can back up what he's trying to do in his script, as opposed to most movies that are just like, well, we'll figure it out, and then it looks like shit.
Yeah.
That scene.
He was like, no, I'm not going to do a liquid Terminator until I know my effects guys can do it and pull it off.
What about that scene when I think he gets hit with a shotgun, and it's like curved around? And is that practical?
Mm-hmm.
That shit's crazy.
Yeah,
and it's very like The Thing.
Yeah. Winston put together. I mean, talk about obviously an iconic makeup effects artist, but yeah, it felt very much like The Thing. And when he's like scooped like that after he gets shot,
I was like, holy shit, that looks amazing.
And one of my absolute favorite like gotcha moments is when he gets knocked like face first into the wall, and then he just goes and flips like his whole body, like inverts it, and then comes back after Arnold when they're fighting. I was like, that's so cool.
It makes like a character that is essentially in a comedy action film, like the villain, very, very creepy.
And I was very scared of him as a kid, and it's crazy to think, like, how do you make something that feels more unstoppable and terrifying than Arnold did as the Terminator in the first one? And somehow they pulled it off in this, and really, until the very end, it doesn't seem like there's going to be any way they can kill this thing.
Because they try with like the liquid nitrogen.
Dude, that scene is fucking dope too. If we're talking about effects, I was just like, yeah, break him. And I just
Break him apart.
Watch him go.
Cameron was like,
so
yeah,
cool.
you want to know how I did the effect of all that liquid nitrogen pouring out on the floor in that scene?
I
poured liquid nitrogen all over the floor. But then he was it was him and the writer and the other writer, and he was like, well, then how do you have Robert Patrick like walking through it safely? And he's like, well, it's because we intercut between liquid nitrogen and then shots of just water and fog and stuff to make it look like it, and then we just took Christmas tree flocking and put it all over him to make him look like he was freezing. But they cut it
old school movies, man.
so nicely, yeah. But just talking about things that are, I don't think we even really need to go into like the story, but closer to the beginning, beats that I really love is the idea that Sarah, to me, totally logically, you would think, where does this character go after the events of Terminator? And she is like basically in an insane asylum, like in a mental hospital. Nobody really believes her. You get that same doctor from the first one.
I was
who comes
wondering,
back,
yeah, okay.
and is even more of a shit eater in this one. And yeah, everybody just thinks she's a quack, but she knows 100% that basically everyone she's looking at is a dead person. She's like, none of you matter, and none of this matters. The only thing that matters is me making sure that John is okay, so that until she makes the choice later in the film that her fate is what she makes it. Their fate can be whatever they want it to be. Her determination is got to make sure John survives so he becomes the leader of the resistance. And she's obviously like kind of destroyed their relationship because much like what they tried to do with Laurie Strode, she's like raised him to know all about guns and all this shit and be all militant and everything and trying to prepare him, and has basically like fucked up his childhood. So when we meet him, he's disillusioned with the whole thing. He's just like, I'm a teenager. I don't give a shit about whatever my mom said. And but then so he's like off fucking around.
Well, he believed her. She gets caught, puts in an institution, and he's like, okay, everything I know is a lie. And then we get to flip.
Yeah, and I love when he's like, oh shit, my mom was right. And then immediately, and this outside of like, you see him kind of taking a little bit of a leader role with his friend in the beginning where he's making all the decisions and stuff. But this is where he's like, okay, she was right. We got to get her out. And he immediately starts taking charge.
Yeah,
and then he starts and pretty much immediately starts trying to tell the Terminator what to do. He has that great moment where the Terminator he's like, oh, it's out of our mission parameters or whatever. And he asks the Terminator to let him go and he drops him or whatever. And without dialogue to explain what's going on, you have John figure out immediately and go, oh, you have to listen to what I say because I reprogrammed you and sent you back. So you have to listen to me. Such a cool time travel idea where it's like, yeah, it's the same person and he's a robot. So of course he'd just be like, yeah, you're John Connor. I have to listen to you.
It's so funny when those dudes walk up. It's like, you got a problem? He's like, put your light down.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little things like that, and a lot of the comedy works.
Yeah, the comedy works, and I think that one of the other things that they really up the factor for, aside from the effects, is just the spectacle. And I think this is part of the other films that Cameron worked on in between making the first one and making this one, were kind of like the training wheels that he needed to create what is now known as like a typical Cameron movie, which is just, what's the biggest spectacle that I can put on a screen for whatever money I have at this point.
What's the biggest machine that someone can get in and chase somebody else in?
Yeah.
There's a lot of semi-trucks getting crashed in this. I was cracking up.
But there's like so much of this movie is so expertly and he I mean, Cameron is great with this in general, like in True Lies, which I just watched for the first time as an unofficial part of this series. He has the bridge blow up at the end, and the way that that's intercut between an actual bridge that had a part missing and models, and the way in this, like the truck, these trucks are at some points models, some of the explosions are models exploding, but it's so hard to tell because everything is blended so seamlessly.
Beetlejuice is talking about the models.
Nice fucking models. And speaking of Sarah Connor's character in this movie and how she's gone, how she's crazy, and this is her whole thing now.
She's a twin, right? Linda Hamilton?
Yeah.
And that's how they do that shot at the end?
Yeah, so she has a twin, and also the cop at the vending machine that the T-1000 turns into and looks at himself was also twins, because Cameron was like, that'll just save us a ton of money. So unfortunately, her twin sister passed away a few years ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but yeah, she does have a twin. She looks ripped as shit in this movie, and no wonder Cameron married her after this.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, they were married and had one or two kids together, but much like every other relationship that Cameron's been in, it lasted for like 5 years and then they divorced. But yeah, so
he was destined to sail the seas.
Well, she gets to play. She gets in awesome shape to where she's scary, and then she gets to play like an entirely different character than she played in the first one. But
she's not a damsel in distress anymore.
But it feels logical, and she takes the things that she's learned from Kyle and kind of taken those into what she's doing now. And then she's got that paranoia that you would have. You're like, these things can fucking time travel as far as I know. And like, what if another one's going to come out of nowhere? Like, are we safe? When's Judgment Day? What's happening? She's having these insane nightmares about the nuclear explosion.
I feel like that's relevant now.
Yeah, where her flesh is just being ripped off into a skeleton. And then on top of all of that, she's kind of become the thing she's afraid of, because she ends up becoming a better Terminator than Arnold's Terminator does in this movie, because he's becoming more humanized. She's becoming more like a machine, and she decides that her goal in order to change the future is to go kill this Miles Dyson guy, who I always know is from Smallville.
Right.
Yeah, but she's going to go kill Miles Dyson, which is exactly the plan that Skynet has had this entire time, is if we go kill somebody from the past, we can change the future, and she's like, I'm just gonna go kill this guy in the present to change the future. So she's falling for the same fucking trick.
Pretty
Meanwhile,
much.
Arnold's over here hasta la vista babying.
Yeah, I mean, this is the part of the movie too where the T-1000 just disappears for a good chunk of the movie. I was like, where's he at? And I was like, oh, that's, yeah.
He's waiting in the wings.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. I was like, okay, so they just needed to have him not catch up for a while.
Yeah, and Cameron said that basically what he wanted to do was turn the Arnold's Terminator, Sarah, and John into a weird nuclear family. And I think if we
Works.
didn't spend that time with John, and as much as people don't like this version, if they're like arguing between the two Terminator movies of him being like sillier and learning to be human, it works because then you care about them as a weird family unit at the end when the Terminator has to sacrifice himself.
I think Furlong is a good performance. I mean, I was into what he was doing, and he seems, I know you said earlier, or, you know, when we were talking that he wasn't an actor or anything and had no training, but I mean, a lot of his delivery just seems pretty natural, especially like the conversations that he has with this robot or this cyborg. I was like, okay, this seems like legit.
Yeah, and Arnold wasn't into this idea either when he first heard about it. He was like, the Terminator is such a badass, cool character. Why would I want to go this route with it? And
Still a
I mean,
badass,
yeah, he
though.
still gets
Yeah.
plenty of. I mean,
Well,
the
and that was his-
minigun scene. Holy
There's a
shit!
dude rising. Minigun.
that was his one stipulation outside of being paid $12 to $15 million, while, like I said, Linda Hamilton got paid $1 million for this movie, but was that his character still had to be cool. He was like, I can do all this silly stuff, but I still at the end of the day have to be cool.
I hated the bad to the bone. Like, I was like, oh, this is so like on the nose.
So literally everybody told Cameron not to use it because it was an overused song and it was corny.
Yeah.
And Cameron was like, fuck you, I'm going to use it because he wanted the audience to have like the, woo, yeah, he's back, the Terminator moment. And it kind of shows what his approach to this whole thing
I was like,
going into this movie.
I hate that part every time.
It's not as bad as the like strip club version of him getting his clothes in T3, and then he comes out and puts
really?
on like the Elton John's like sparkly star glasses.
I don't remember.
When he
I
gets
think I've
his-
seen that movie
It's- yeah, it's
once.
been
he gets his
so
clothes from
long.
like a male stripper in the bar or something. But
And that spins off to Magic Mike.
but like you said, like in terms of other things that spin off of the first one, the whole fact that Cyberdyne gets the hand and gets the chip, and
Yeah.
that's why they're able to create Skynet. I love that the Miles Dyson character gets confronted with this proof, which is such a cool, creepy scene when Arnold just like walks in, cuts the skin off his arm, and rips it off, and
yeah.
goes, "There you go." Quick way to convince this guy that you're telling the truth. And he decides. He kind of becomes a tragic hero, Dyson, because he's like, oh shit, and helps them start destroying all of his life's work, like all the shit that he never knew was going to turn into a nuclear defense creepo. Like,
Yeah, he just hopes it's gonna be the
guy
thing that
created
protects
K-Pods.
the world.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that's not how it works out. So he's willing to not only sacrifice his life's work, but also sacrifice himself in order to make sure that humanity survives.
What do you think of his death? I mean, you get a lot of these deaths where it's like, and his is like way different than I feel like we get to see in other movies where he's like,
Yeah, he gets into it. Definitely. Yeah, he definitely has like that like death rattle kind of.
originally intended for Denzel Washington, that part, but he felt like it was a bit too like sniveling, and
yeah.
but I think that all the performances in this are fucking great. Like, and yeah, Edward Furlong, like, yeah, this may be the only standout performance he ever gave, but for coming out of a boys and girls club and just them going, we like your look, and then giving him a little bit of acting training, he pulls it off and makes for a lot of iconic moments in the movie. And I buy the idea that this kid would go on to be the leader of a resistance in the future, and even in the alternate ending for this movie, after they stop Judgment Day, there was supposed to be a scene of an older Sarah like on the playground, like with grandkids or whatever, and John was a senator and had kids, and so he still became like a leader. And also it could be that if he did become the leader of the resistance, could be because he friended up with a Terminator when he was young and had all this exposure to it and everything. Like, it's the weird time travel.
And we get to see the first
Shenanigans.
glimpse of John in this one as an adult. He's all
Yeah, with
scarred
like a big
up.
scar on his face and
Classic.
everything. Yeah, and then we've gotten the most inconsistent. It's like Batman. It's like every movie is a new John Connor. We had
Christian Bale
in Salvation. We
And
had
what's his face from
Jason Clarke.
Yeah, Jason Clarke.
in Genesis. What's his name? Is it Nicholas something
In what?
in T3?
Oh, yeah.
From
I know what you're talking about.
I don't know, but yeah. And then we have this John Connor, the adult John Connor, and the Edward Furlong John Connor.
So many Johns.
So many
There's
John
one I need,
Connors.
baby.
Which one do I shoot? Yeah. Anything else that you guys wanted to point out or say about this movie? I mean, like I said, it's hard for me to separate the two movies. I think they're both probably 5s at the end of the day, and I really dug all of the ways they were able to twist the whole idea that it's like, hey, in the first one, you don't know whether it's possible for them to change the future. It's just like, okay, well, are we?
What would you do if you could change your fate?
Rage. I didn't know what you were quoting, so I just quoted.
I was
something else.
brave.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it.
The animated movie? Yeah. I understand.
Yeah, in the first one, you don't know if they're in one of those time travel situations where the future is set and they can't change it, and they just have to do what they can to make sure. But Skynet thinks they can change it, and in this, Sarah takes that power into her own hands and says, no fate but what we make. And if you are leaving the story off at this movie, which you should, they successfully stop Judgment Day and they save the future. And I think that's like a pretty great ending to this pair of movies. Doesn't need any more. I don't want it.
Well, too bad. Because there's how many more? 4 more?
More than
3 Salvation, Genesis, and Dark Fate or whatever the fuck. Yeah, 4 more. Plus the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Anybody ever watch that?
I did. I fucking loved that show. I was
Really?
super into it. Oh yeah, Thomas Dekker plays John Connor in that, and Lena Headey from Game of Thrones plays Sarah Connor.
Is it good?
I really, really liked it a lot.
What's it? Is it like the years before she gets institutionalized?
No, so the idea is that I think after T2, they end up time traveling, and it's a way for them to ignore T3 and go into a separate timeline. So they end up time traveling with, I think, the Summer Glau Cameron Terminator, and they end up going past the events of T3 into like what was modern day at that time. They basically skip over T3 and then are living in this like more modern day future or whatever, and more Terminators come, and it's crazy. But I really, really liked it back in the day.
That sounds cool.
So yeah, check that out wherever it is. Couple little bits of random trivia that I didn't know where to place specifically, so I just wanted to mention them. Speaking of Skynet being hella dumb, in the original treatment for Terminator, the way that the Terminator was going to try to track down Sarah Connor was that she was supposed to have had a leg injury where she had metal pins put into her leg. And he was actually going to like brutally cut open the legs of the Sarah Connors that he was going after to see if they had the injury. And then it was going to turn out at the end that she got the injury from the attack of the Terminator. So they had accidentally sent it. They didn't know when the injury happened. They just looked at her file and knew like, oh, she had a leg injury. And so they didn't send it. They're the reason why she had the leg injury in the first place, which I thought was a neat little thing that didn't end up making it into the movie. And then I don't know if you guys noticed at the end of the first one, but there's a credit to Harlan Ellison, the science fiction writer.
Yeah, I did see that.
It says
with
acknowledgments to Harlan Ellison. It's because he sued.
I was going to look that up.
Yeah, he sued because he said that James Cameron ripped off 2 episodes of The Outer Limits that were based on stories of his. One called Soldier, which is about 2 time-traveling soldiers who get sent back to the past to save a person who's important in the future. And then another one called Demon with a Glass Hand. I don't know what that one's about, but I guess they both have elements that are similar to Terminator. Cameron was basically like, I'll pay you the money and give you the acknowledgement just to get it out of my hair, but he still to this day like says that there's no connection. And I kind of believe it, because really at the end of the day, I feel like time travel and robots in the future is not a super original idea. Like multiple people can have that idea.
Well, I mean, we see that with studios all the time now, where it's like 2 movies are coming out at the same time that are basically the same thing. Like
Ants in a Bug's Life, The Illusionist, and Prestige.
It happens.
White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last bit that I thought was really funny is that the movie was released. The original movie, The Terminator, was released in the 1980s in Poland under the title "The Electronic Murderer."
There you go.
Because I guess the word Terminator meant something like apprentice in Polish, and they were like, well, that's not intimidating, so we'll call him the electronic murderer.
Apprentice.
And then by the time T2 came out, the original Terminator had such a huge success on like bootleg VHSs that everybody in Poland knew that Terminator meant Arnold. And so when T2 came out, they were like, okay, it's not the Electronic Murderer 2 Judgment Day. It's just Terminator 2.
What do we want? Do you want to rate it?
Yeah.
Out of 5,
Come on, Mom.
yeah, out of 5. Come on, Mom.
Out of 5, come on, Mom.
Oh man.
I think I'm at a 4.5 for both. I feel like that, like they're both very, very good, very influential science fiction, horror in one, and comedy in the other, and comedy action. They're Cameron-defining films and they're genre-defining films. I just feel like, I don't know, there's little parts of it that just don't quite add up for me. Like I said, I talked about for the Terminator that, like I said, there's some stuff that just didn't feel like it would have aged well a year after the movie came out. And I feel like for this one, I feel like the logic's not quite as good. Like wasn't ironclad in the first one, but it's a lot less ironclad in this one. And I think that it's just tough. Because, like, especially knowing what springs off of this, it kind of sullies these two films in a little bit. But I mean, like I said, I think that the two of them, if they were just the two films, they would, they stand the test of time. And I think that's worth being in that like 90th or whatever percentile grouping amongst sci-fi films.
Well, Cameron feels very similarly to the way you do. He makes fun of T3 in the T2 commentary track because they did the special edition commentary track like after T3 had already come out, and he like makes fun of the way that they did, at some point Arnold, I guess, says she'll be back. And so in this movie, when he does the I'll be back, he's like, what do you think is better? Arnold saying I'll be back or she'll be back? And also he didn't make any money from any of the ones that came out after T2 because he had to do a lot of like finagling. I think he sold the rights to the first movie for $1 to Gale Ann Hurd, the producer, who he also married. And then those rights ended up shuffling around a million different studios and all the movies that were made after that. And then eventually in 2019, I think he got the rights back. But still couldn't make any royalties from all those movies that were made.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, I really, really enjoy these movies. I'm not like a diehard Cameron fan, but it was really cool to go back, and I'm a diehard Terminator fan because I grew up with these movies, and they introduced me to a lot of ideas. And the genre, if anybody's curious, is called, at least for the first movie, tech noir. No, that's actually like the reason the club is called tech noir is because that's what Cameron was like. This is what this genre is called.
It takes out
elements of noir films and takes elements of future technology and blends them together, and it's called tech noir. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I like that. And Blade Runner would also be considered tech noir. Obviously.
I was trying to get to that club. I was like, let's just go dance.
Yeah, I guess they were actually having to turn real club goers away because they built the club and put the sign up and everything, and they had to turn people away. And people were like, "This looks rad," and it was like, "Nope." And now it's like a nail salon or something.
Oh, that's sad. All right, well, wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Great. That's the beginning of Cameron Christmas. And next week, we're going to talk about Avatar. The following week, we're going to talk about Avatar: Way of Water. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to wrap it up with The Abyss. So if you haven't jumped on that Cameron train, now would be a good time to do so. If you haven't already, please check out our bonus episode over on Patreon, where we talked about the first 3 episodes of Andor, a Star Wars story.
Star Wars Andor, a Star Wars story featuring Andor.
Anyway, thanks for checking out this episode. We will see you next time. I've been Tone.
I've been John.
And I've been a cybernetic organism. Come with me if you want to live.
We'll be back.
Internet Terminator Anthony.
Keep it creepy.